Hey, so I'm using a throwaway account right now, and I'll also be using fake names for privacy reasons. I'll try to keep my post short, but since there's a lot of context, try to bear with me. Thank you. So, I am a 26-year-old female and have been married to my husband Nick, a 27-year-old male, for a year now. I met him 3 years ago at a work party and we got along really well, so we went out on a couple of dates after that and decided to get into a relationship after a few months. After 3 years of dating, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. We get along with each other's families, too. My family consists of my parents and I. I've never had any siblings, and my cousins all live in different cities, so we met only on the holidays. I never knew what being part of a big family that gets together for every event was like, and I found out only after I started dating Nick. His immediate family consists of his parents, an older sister Tessa, a 30-year-old female, and a younger brother Alex, a 22-year-old male. Alex still lives with his parents in their house, and my in-laws' house is right down the street from where Tessa lives with her husband. Tessa has been married for 5 years to her husband Mark, a 32-year-old male, and they have a 3-year-old daughter Amy. My in-laws' house is at a location that is easily reachable by most members of my husband's immediate and extended family, like his aunts and uncles and cousins. All of them live in the same city and get together at least once a month, and my in-laws are always the host, so Nick and I try our best to attend. They've always been kind to me and I'm grateful for that, but since I wasn't used to this kind of tight-knit family and such frequent socializing, I'd get tired really quickly at these gatherings and would want to come back home early, and Nick would get mad. He believes that I get too exhausted too quickly whenever it comes to his family because I'm not used to this, and thinks that I'm not even trying to understand his family's dynamics, while I think that he's a little too enthusiastic about his family. We've had a couple of disagreements about this over the years, but it's just one of those things that we have to agree to disagree on. So whenever I find myself getting too tired at his family's parties, I drive myself home and he comes back on his own time. Sometimes I have to skip because I'm too tired from work and he has to be okay with it. He hasn't said anything about this arrangement so far, so I figured that he must have been okay with it. I didn't mind his enthusiasm about his family either, because this issue only caused minor disagreements between us, but never full-blown fights, so I thought it was fine. Now, about 2 weeks ago, my sister-in-law Tessa asked me to accompany her on a girls' trip to LA with her and her daughter, since it was her 31st birthday in a few days, but her husband would be away on a business trip, and her friends were all busy with their own work and lives. I liked Tessa because she was sweet to me, but at the same time, I was about to be assigned a really important project in a few weeks, so I didn't want to miss work. But my husband pushed me to go on the trip because once I took up the project, I wouldn't be able to take a holiday for quite a while, and he was right. So I agreed to accompany her, and we were scheduled to take our flight 2 days ago. Tessa had been kind enough to pay for me, so I had nothing to worry about money-wise. We were supposed to stay in LA just for Tessa's birthday weekend and then come back, so I'd packed for 2 days and a little extra. It was just one bag and that was it, but when I got to the airport yesterday, I realized that Tessa had a bunch of bags and all of them looked ready to burst, as if she was carrying her entire wardrobe inside those bags. She also didn't look in the mood for a party and had a very grim look on her face. She'd asked me to reach the airport an hour early for some reason, but I didn't ask her why. I figured she wanted to beat the traffic, so she wanted me to leave early, and so I did. On seeing the bags, I asked her if she was planning to stay in LA as a joke, but she turned to me and told me that she actually was, with a straight face. I was very confused, so I asked her if she was being serious, and again she said yes with the same face. Then she told me that she'd recently found out that her husband Mark had been cheating on her with one of his friends. I was dumbfounded when she said that because from what I'd heard, Tessa and Mark had been together since high school and he seemed to be head over heels in love with her. So for him to cheat seemed very far-fetched. I asked her how she'd found out, and she then told me that one of her friends had spotted him at lunch with his friend, and apparently they'd been hugging and laughing 3 weeks ago. She didn't confront her husband after she received this information, and neither did she ask him anything about it, but made up her mind to leave without a word instead. She'd booked our tickets to LA a few days before she asked me to accompany her, and once we got there, she'd be living with a friend and needed my help to settle down there permanently. After telling me this, she went back to sulking again. Now, I'm not a relationship expert, but I'm pretty sure that a man hugging another woman could be platonic as well. And Tessa hadn't even seen this firsthand, a friend had told her about it. So it seemed really ridiculous to me that she was leaving him over something as petty as this without even trying to address the issue and talk to him about it to find out the truth. She'd just jumped to the conclusion that he was cheating, and because of that, not only was she leaving him, but she was also taking his daughter away without his knowledge, and that seemed too close to abduction for me to be comfortable with it. I wanted to call the cops, but I wasn't sure what good it would do, since she had every right to take her child with her wherever she wanted to, and I also didn't want to meddle without letting Mark know about the situation first. So I decided to go to the ladies' room, and from there I made a call to Mark to warn him about what was about to happen. I filled him in on what Tessa had told me, and just as I'd suspected, he hadn't been cheating, and that hug had been totally platonic. He told me that he was reuniting with a friend of his from his college days who was finally getting married after years of waiting and bad relationships. So that was a purely platonic, celebratory hug that Tessa's friend had misconstrued. In fact, Tessa had even known that he was meeting an old friend for lunch. I asked him if he wanted me to call the police to stop Tessa from leaving, but he said that he didn't want to get the cops involved, and just like me, he thought it'd be pretty pointless since, as Amy's mother, she had full custody of her and could choose to take her wherever she wished to. Unfortunately, he wasn't in town at the time and was away on a business trip, so Tessa had been serious about that part. When I told him what his wife was trying to do, he started panicking and hyperventilating and told me to hold her off for as long as possible, and he'd try to talk to her and stop her from leaving however he can. I told him that I'd try my best and then went back out. Once I came back out and found Tessa, I was shocked to find Nick standing beside her as well. I'll admit, I'd totally forgotten to contact Nick in crisis mode because at the time it felt more important to warn Mark instead. I made my way towards them, and I deduced that Nick must have been in on Tessa's plan and was going to accompany us as well, because otherwise he wouldn't have pushed so hard for me to join Tessa on the trip. He even said surprise when I saw him, but I was still struggling to keep a smile on my face given the circumstances. Within a few minutes, Tessa's phone started ringing, and at first she declined the calls. I knew for a fact that it was Mark calling, but said nothing because I was panicking too. She finally answered the call the fourth or fifth time and spoke to Mark. They ended up getting into a fight once Mark confronted her. And Tessa was loud enough to attract a lot of weird looks, but I for one was glad that Mark was addressing the situation and kept praying that she'd choose to go back home instead. I couldn't hear Mark's side of the conversation, but judging by Tessa's replies, I assumed that he must have threatened to take her to court and tried to scare her into dropping the plan, which is what she did eventually. Nick and I had been silent for the entire duration of the call, but as soon as Tessa hung up, she turned on me and started screaming at me about how I was a snitch and said that she'd never trusted me anyway. She accused me of ruining her and her daughter's life by forcing her to stay with a cheater and called me a bunch of names. I didn't want to argue with her, so I ignored her and tried to leave, but was stopped by Nick, who looked really annoyed and asked me what I'd done. By then, Tessa was sitting and crying while people continued to stare at her. I told Nick the truth about what I'd done and even added that it was the right thing to do since Mark wasn't even cheating on her and she had no right to take Amy away from him without proof. And Nick was furious that I'd decided to meddle, and just like his sister had said, even he reiterated it and told me that it had been a mistake to trust me in the first place. He said that the only reason he'd even included me was because he hadn't been certain if he'd be able to accompany Tessa or not, since he was meeting with an important client today and couldn't afford to miss it, so he'd believed that I'd help Tessa instead. But I just ruined any chance of her escape by informing Mark. I was really hurt that even he couldn't see where I was coming from and tried to defend Mark, but he refused to see my point and instead told me that it was his fault to even expect me to understand any of this, since I'd never had a family where loyalty meant something, and that was the reason. I didn't even want to be a part of his family wholeheartedly, referring to the fact that I wouldn't attend his family's frequent gathering. That was offensive, because obviously I'd be loyal to my family, but I couldn't just sit back and let something awful happen to somebody whom I knew for a fact was innocent. I wasn't going to stand for something that was just unethical and wrong on every conceivable level, but he brought up how I barely ever attended his family's parties, never made an effort to get along with them, and was always too caught up in my own life to care about anyone else. He accused me of being self-centered in our marriage, and now that selfishness had ruined his sister's chance to get away from a cheater. At that point, I blew up at him and told him that he and his sister never should have involved me in any of this if they really believed that I was that selfish and untrustworthy. If he didn't want me to meddle in this, then maybe he shouldn't have told me to accompany Tessa in the first place. I then told him to take a hike and then stormed out of the airport, took the first cab I found, and headed straight to my parents' place. I've been here since then and haven't heard from Nick or Tessa, or even Mark for that matter, after I got here. I told my parents what had happened and they have tried their best to comfort me, but I still just feel so lost and upset. I don't understand what to feel right now. Am I the a-hole for meddling with Tessa's plan to take her daughter away and preventing that by informing Mark about it? Update 1. Hi everyone. I'm sorry about the late update, but the past few days have been really busy and tense for me, so I haven't been using my phone much. First of all, thank you so much for being so nice to me and reassuring me that I wasn't the villain here and I was just looking out for someone who, just like me, was totally innocent but was going to be punished for it. It's been close to a week since I left my husband at the airport, and he hasn't tried to contact me since then, but Mark has. 2 days after the incident, he called me and thanked me for informing him in the nick of time and standing up for what was right. He also told me that he'd taken the next available flight back home an hour or two after I'd told him what was going on, and he hadn't been able to thank me properly since he was busy confronting his wife on the first day, and then on the second day he was moving out of the house. Apparently, Tessa had always been really jealous of this friend of his, but had never told him about it. She'd moved out of the country after they graduated from college, but when Mark mentioned to Tessa that he was going to meet this woman for lunch, she pretended to be okay with it, but also told a friend of hers to follow Mark to keep an eye on him. So the friend who happened to witness the hug was there by design. And it wasn't just an unfortunate coincidence. They'd had a huge fight over this, and Mark had decided to file for divorce and full custody of Amy because Tessa's behavior had been nothing short of psychotic, to say the least. I am glad he's taking that step, and it has encouraged me to do the same as well. Nick hasn't reached out to me to apologize or even talk about things, and it's been a week now, so I don't think that this marriage can be saved anymore either. I feel bad about how things have turned out, but at least I know now that I was not the bad guy here. They're the ones who act like their family is like a cult or something. Family loyalty is for when you tell harmless little white lies and make your family feel better about themselves and being their source of courage when they need to do something difficult but good. Covering up for your sister and helping her make a run for it just because she suspects her husband has cheated, because he hugged a friend in a happy moment, no less, and taking away someone's daughter from them isn't included in my definition of family loyalty, at least. If Nick and his sister want to play the victim here, then they're welcome to. But I'm not going to entertain this act at all. I've already told my dad about my decision to file for divorce, and they seemed content that I've decided to leave. They told me that they were proud of me, and were actually looking for the right time to suggest a divorce themselves. I wish I could tell Nick that this is what a healthy family looks like, not whatever organized cult they have going on for themselves right now, where they only care about their own blood, with little to no concern about ethics, morals, or other people in their lives. Update 2. So I spoke to a friend of my dad's who's a divorce lawyer a few days back, and told him about my situation and that I wanted to file for divorce. He drew up the papers in about 3 days, and today I finally did it. It's been a little over a week since the airport incident, and Nick still hasn't spoken to me, and honestly, now I really wish that he doesn't speak to me ever again. I have nothing to say to him, and I can't imagine that he'll have anything to say that will make our marriage salvageable. He's made his choice, and so have I. The only regret I have is that I didn't make this choice any sooner, but better late than never, right? I'm still living with my parents, but I've also started looking for apartments near my workplace, which happen to be far, far away from my old house. I can't claim that house in the divorce since it was a wedding gift from my in-laws, but it's fine, he can have it. Neither do I want the house back, and nor do I want my husband back. I'm better off without both. Update 3. So big day today because Nick was served today. I didn't think that he would care because, like I said, he hadn't made the effort to speak to me and resolve things after our big fight at the airport. But apparently he does care and wants to mend our relationship. It's just that he cares for all the wrong reasons, and I genuinely don't know how I didn't ever see this side of him before. He called me up today and demanded an explanation, and I told him point blank that he hadn't thought that it was important to speak to me after the fight and apologize to make things right. So now, I didn't think it was important for me to stay with him anymore, and I wanted to get out of this marriage. He told me that he'd been waiting for me to apologize, which was just ridiculous because I hadn't even done anything wrong. He was the one who had accused me of being selfish and untrustworthy and just stood by and watched while his sister called me derogatory names in front of strangers. He was the one who was helping Tessa do something really disgusting and unethical. So really there was just no way I was in the wrong here, and he and his family couldn't just gaslight me into believing otherwise. I'd already spoken to normal people, and I knew the truth. He argued that I was being difficult, and said that this is not how families work. He demanded that I stop the divorce proceedings, come back to him, and try to mend the relationship instead of running away from the situation. Not because we loved each other, but because in his family divorce was unacceptable and went against his family's values. Let me just repeat this for emphasis. He didn't want me back because he loved me, but again, because that's what his family wanted for him. His family wanted him to do something, which is why I had to adhere to it as well, and mind you, he didn't even apologize to me. The situation itself was so ridiculous, and the conviction with which he was speaking was even more hilarious, so I ended up laughing on the phone for at least 3 minutes. It was crazy how he was so convinced that this was what would force me to come back. I seriously don't have any idea how I managed to put up with this guy for so many years. I'm just lucky I didn't have a kid with him yet, because that would be irreversible and I wouldn't want to curse anyone else with a husband or father like Nick. Once I started laughing, I guess he felt really insulted, so he just called me the B word and then disconnected the call. I couldn't care less about him being mad at me, and in fact, I'm hoping that he stays mad at me and responds to the divorce petition as soon as possible. I truly hope he doesn't decide to contest the divorce, because that will be really bothersome, and I just want to move on from this as soon as possible. It's been a few hours and he hasn't tried to call or text me yet, so I'm still hopeful that he's given up, but you never really know. I'm just going to keep praying that he leaves me alone. On a happier note, I did speak to Mark a few days back, and he told me that his divorce is going just the way he'd expected it to, so that's for everyone who was asking about him. Amy's just fine as well, and she's living with Mark's parents for the time being. Update 4. Hey guys, so it's been quite a while since I posted here, almost 2 weeks. But these past 2 weeks felt like an eternity, if I'm being honest. When Nick realized that he couldn't convince me to come back, he first took to bombarding me with texts the next day onwards. But then I blocked him, so he decided to talk to my friends and bother them instead. But I found a solution for that as well, and just told them exactly what had happened and instructed all my friends to block him immediately. I thought I'd managed to get rid of him for a week or so, but then he decided to harass my parents instead. He called my mother up from a different number and told her that she'd failed at raising a decent human being, and actually said that he wished she'd terminated her pregnancy instead of birthing someone as immoral as me. And within a few hours of that, he decided to call my father up and said similar things. He also accused them of breaking our marriage, as if his own family and personality weren't repulsive enough to achieve that feat by itself. Anyway, I did get back to him, and told him that if he bothered me or my family again, then I'd make sure to inform the police about his harassment. The only reason I hadn't already was because I was too busy, but I swear I would have done it if I had the time or the patience to deal with the hassle. He argued with me on the phone, and we had a nasty argument. But at least he stopped bothering us after that. Easy. He isn't contesting the divorce either, which is a huge relief, because that means I'll be out of here faster. I've already moved into a new apartment and will probably go back in a few days to collect my clothes. I'll definitely take a male friend along because I do not trust this psycho. I'll finally be rid of him in a few months.